Yeah, we are recording.
I feel so conflicted on this chapter. There's a lot that I liked and some things kind of wary of. But hey, we finally got more politics.
Yes,
Yay.
I thought that you were going to like this chapter because we got the politics and the maneuvering and all of that. I thought Dorkus will like this. So I'm interested to find out what you didn't like.
Yeah. I loved Elend in this chapter. I think he behaved and performed wonderfully.
Yes.
I really, hear me out, really liked Phelan.
Okay. I hate him. Okay.
I hate him too.
But that's
what I mean is,
yeah,
I really, really like how he is characterized. I think he is leagues above Straff in terms of being a grounded villain, just in this short time that we've had him thus far.
Yes, very well done. Yeah, that's what I'm like, because I dislike him so much. It's just an indicator of how well he's written.
Yeah, I mean, right away you get that Napoleon complex thing. And this whole, I'm a merchant, not a ska, even though he's ska, is such an interesting, and his name, it is all such interesting, specific characterization. So I think he's a great villain, and I'm sorry, Straff. I've expressed my opinions about him with regard to being that mustache twirler, but Phelan, grounded and interesting, and I am all about him as a villain this book right now.
Yeah, he's formidable in his own way. Another thing, his tactics, what he has done, it's very smart.
Yeah. So obviously we get the first assembly meeting, apparently.
Yes, I'm a bit out of it in terms of where we are time-wise versus...
Yeah.
Yeah. So that wasn't just me?
No, I'm very confused. Because Vin specifically thought a week had passed and he had been working on his stuff, Elend. And you're telling, like, obviously he could have met with individuals, but you're telling me that a full quarter of that month went by and the assembly didn't do anything about nominating. Why would Phelan wait for Elend's meeting? Because Elend called for the meeting to be made to nominate a new king, given Phelan's been planning this whole thing. Why would he wait for that? And why didn't he call the meeting in between that time? And it's just, I'm sorry, the timeline is confusing me.
I'm trying to do some mental gymnastics here to help, because he seems to think that he can try and stay under the radar while doing this. That he didn't, because he's like, oh, Elend doesn't know that I called for the vote or whatever. He thinks about that. So maybe calling for a meeting would be too much of an obvious move, that it's him doing the behind the scenes thing. Maybe he wanted the next move to be made by Elend. So, and also it seems like he was really waiting for this Elend's response, whatever it was going to be. He was expecting more resistance. So maybe we'll have a little bit more, we'll be able to glean a bit more about it. But yeah, for me at the moment, I'm like, I don't know what's happening time-wise. It seems weird. But I'm open to being swapped around, basically, to being explained to.
Yeah. And then, well, we'll get into it as we get through it, I'm sure. But the focus of this chapter is the meeting and Vin's role in the meeting and so on and so forth.
And the ending of the meeting, the dramatic reveal.
Yes, and I will express my opinions when we get there.
All right.
Hello, and wait, who are you doing this time?
I think we've run out of characters.
That's right. I had to go back and listen to chapter 10 again, because I didn't remember any of the voices that I did for these characters so long ago.
Due diligence, you did it.
Yeah.
I suppose we can do it as one of those two, whichever one
Excellent.
you enjoy doing. Because I'm going to do it poorly, so like whatever you want to do for yours.
I feelin' then?
Okay.
Hello, and welcome to the No One Asked You podcast. For this particular series, I am joined by my wonderful co-host, that darn Kitty.
Dorkus and I are both going into the story completely new with almost no knowledge of the story or world.
Each segment, we intend to cover what happens in each new chapter and discuss our experience along the way.
Hold on to your butts, because this is Ascension Unleashed, a blind read-through, and today we'll be covering Chapter 31.
Chapter 31.
In the end, my pride may have doomed us all.
Okay, we get it. We've had maybe 3 or 4 epigraphs now of Quan wailing into the distance, basically. It's like, okay, we get it. So
Yeah.
tell us more now.
Yeah, that's very much what I'm feeling with these epigraphs. I still want more. I want more substance, less self-pity.
Less feelings.
If I haven't said it before, I suppose if you feel you've doomed the world, you have a right to some self-pity. But
True.
But damn it, tell us something more.
Yeah, like you can actually complain in your writing, the whole thing, but the stuff that gets put in front of our chapters can be more substantial. Okay, so in between, you can have a whole rant about how unhappy you are, but in terms of the information released to us, I would like more.
Yeah. In terms of pride, obviously, Phelan has some pride.
Quite. Yes.
And obviously, he's the architect of the coup, as we are about to learn, which in a sense could doom the city.
Yes. So his pride. Does Elend have pride? No.
Well, Elend is conflicted in this chapter about using Vin, and I'm still skeptical about whether or not it's really using Vin, but characters feel as if Vin is being used in this way. So there could be a topic of pride therein, but I don't know that it's something I really explored this week as I contemplated this chapter.
And definitely not as much as it applies to Phelan.
Yeah. And I don't know if Vin being neurotic about being the one to hold the knife could be considered pride. I don't think that's what her thing is about at all. Like maybe if you twist it or like cherry pick it, it could work, but I don't think it's applicable.
Yeah, it doesn't work with her character because it's not like, oh, I'm above being a tool, actually, and therefore I don't accept this. It's way more complicated than that, so it doesn't fit. You would have to really shoehorn that in and just be like, oh, she's undergone a lot of changes in this week or so.
Yeah. And with all of that said, Phelan Frandia was not Ska. He had never been Ska. Ska made things or grew things. Phelan sold things. There was an enormous difference between the two. Oh, some people had called him Ska. Even now, he could see that word in the eyes of some of the other assemblymen. They regarded Phelan and his fellow merchants with the same disdain that they gave the 8 Ska workers in the assembly. Couldn't they see that the two groups were completely different? So that right there, I think, really cuts to the heart of who Phelan is.
Yeah.
And it's right there in the first 2 paragraphs, so I'm hooked.
You're already hooked, yeah. You have so much insight into how he thinks. There's 2 completely different groups. He has never been Ska, and it's part of his identity that he has singled himself out against Ska. He's like, no, I'm not that kind. So he's got his own sort of hatred for Ska. Disdain.
Yes. Yep. There's a tremendous amount of narcissism already.
Which is nice and complex and unlikable, but we're here for it.
Yeah. Phelan shifted a bit on the bench. The assembly hall should at least have comfortable seating. They were waiting on a few members. The tall clock in the corner said that 15 minutes still remained until the meeting began. Oddly, one of those who had yet to arrive was Venture himself. King Elend was usually early. Important question here that I had been asking myself.
Mm-hmm.
What role does Elend have on the assembly now? I mean, we note later on that he was the one that called this meeting. So that works all well and good for the purposes of this sole meeting. And by the point that he's in the election, it may not really matter all that much. But if he's just your regular average nobleman, he may not necessarily have a spot on the assembly.
He does confirm, he says, I joined the assembly after. So
Does he? I must have missed that.
He does have a he's not just a guy that's on the outside.
Okay.
Now that he's not king.
I must have totally missed that. Which happens. I'm not perfect.
Yeah, it's quite a subtle thing. I think I'll try and point it out when we get there.
Cool. That answers that question.
But it also then makes us go, ooh, then he really should have seen something of the possibility of what does happen with Set. I didn't, obviously, but I'm not Elend. So.
King Elend was usually early.
Not king anymore,
Thielen thought with a smile.
merely plain old Elend Venture.
It was a poor name, not as good as Thielen's own. Of course, he had been Lyn until a year and a half ago. Thielen Frandia was what he had dubbed himself after the collapse. It delighted him to no end that the others had taken to calling him the name without pause. But why shouldn't he have a grand name? A lord's name? Was Thielen not as good as any of the noblemen sitting aloofly in their places?
We've got noblemen in air quotes there. I guess it's, the name doesn't really make sense to him because it's like, they're not very noble, are they?
No, again, the narcissism is just shining through. He's that much better than them.
He's so much better. And I love the setup about his name because you're like, oh, so he's given himself a name and that's cool. And he loved that everybody, Dorkus has taken to using the name that he's given himself.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Oh, he was just as good. Better, even. Yes, they had called him Ska, but during those years they had come to him, so their arrogant sneers had lacked power. He'd seen their insecurity. They'd needed him, a man they called Ska, but he'd also been a merchant, one who wasn't noble, something that wasn't supposed to have existed in the Lord Ruler's perfect little empire. But noblemen merchants had to work with the obligators, and where there were obligators, nothing illegal could occur. Hence Thielen. He'd been an intermediary of sorts, a man capable of arranging deals between interested parties who, for various reasons, wanted to avoid the watchful eyes of the Lord Ruler's obligators. Excellent exposition, really well done, and still building his character. It informs us who he is and where he comes from. It's great.
His motivations, we have his motivations and also his standards, the things that have made the way he views the world, so we understand so much more coming from him.
Thielen hadn't been part of a thieving crew. No, that was far too dangerous, and far too mundane. He had been born with an eye for finances and trades. Give him 2 rocks and he'd have a quarry by the end of the week. Give him a spoke and he'd change it to a fine horse-drawn carriage. 2 kernels of corn and he'd eventually have a massive shipment of grain sailing to the farmost dominance markets. Actual noblemen had done the trades, of course, but Thielen had been behind it all. A vast empire of his own.
The ego on the man. But I mean, it seems he did have some sort of empire. Okay, it's nothing like the final empire, but he had some sort of,
black market.
Yeah. And it seems what I like about this character is it's like an instinct for him. He's just like, if you give this to me, I'll make this. It's part of him. It's just how he works.
This is who I am.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's something very Peter Baelish about him.
He's a bit too. Okay, look, I get what you're saying. I feel like he's a lot more obvious than Peter Baelish, though.
He's dumb. Yes, he is dumber than Peter Baelish. Peter Baelish is very good at what he does. And to date, no one has really suspected him. I mean, they all dislike him, but they don't really grasp the enormity of what it is that he is doing and has done. Whereas here, obviously, well, he's dumb. Phelan is not. He's got an eye for finances, but
Look, he did do some smart things, but he's not as he was managed. Ellen managed to surprise him as well, and
yes, without even trying to.
Exactly. So I feel like he's lacking in some sort of in a way, but that doesn't make him less of a villain.
I want to retract. I don't think he's as dumb as I've just made it sound, because obviously he did orchestrate what he has managed to orchestrate. I think he's being used by the other party to a tremendous degree for whatever that's worth, but he is smarter than I just gave him credit for.
That is such a good point, that the fact that he's probably, we'll talk about the other party, but he's probably being used by them. We get a sense that his confidence is unfounded in most places. Like the thing about his name and all of that, he thinks, so we get his POV and we're like, oh, look what he thinks, he's killing it. And I can easily see Seth being in control of him, but he thinks it's the other way. So, but all of that just adds to his complexity. He's not just one note.
Yeah. Actual noblemen had done the trades, of course, but Phelan had been behind it all. A vast empire of his own. And still they couldn't see. He wore a suit as fine as theirs. Now that he could trade openly, he had become one of the wealthiest men in Luthadel. Yet the noblemen ignored him, merely because he lacked a valid pedigree.
This for me, a little asterisk here with him. Oh, I've got a suit that's just as fine as theirs. It's actually better. That comes in later as well. It's a beautiful setup. Because he's like, look, I'm wearing everything. I'm wearing better than them, so I should be better, right? And then he compares himself to Ellen, but we'll get there.
I've made the Littlefinger parallel, but thoughts of pedigree highlights what Gurm has said about Littlefinger, which is to say there's a little bit of Gatsby in him, or that topic at least. So obviously that's paralleled here as well.
Yeah, like you made yourself, so you've earned your space there, but
new money.
Yeah, your new money. You don't have this legacy that makes you a nobleman. So I like that angle.
Well, they would see. After today's meeting, yes, they would see. Phelan eyed the crowd, looking anxiously for the person he had hidden there. Reassured, he looked back toward the noblemen of the assembly who sat chatting a short distance away. One of their last members, Lord Fersen Penrod, had arrived. The older man walked up onto the assembly's dais, passing by the members, greeting each in turn. Phelan, Penrod said, noticing him. A new outfit, I see. The red vest suits you.
Lord Penrod, why, you're looking well. You got over the other night's ailment?
Yes, it passed quickly, the Lord said, nodding a head topped with silver hair. Merely a touch of stomach ills.
Pity,
Phelan thought, smiling.
Well, we'd best be seated. I see that young Venture isn't here, though.
Yes, Penrod said, frowning. He'd been most difficult to convince to vote against Venture. He had something of a fondness for the boy. He had come around in the end. They all had. That's a nice little bit of info right there.
Before, just stepping back a little bit, when he mentions this person he has in the crowd, what was your feeling or expectation around that?
Well, it certainly wasn't who it ended up being.
Yeah, you were surprised by who it ended up being.
I was surprised by who it ended up being, but to be honest, I don't remember thinking too hard. Oh, who could it be? You
were just in the chapter.
Yeah, and I I assumed it was someone that would help him advance his goals.
Yeah, you just were just
And-
like, okay, whatever. He's got something cooking here. We'll find out what it is. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was sufficiently content to accept that.
Yeah, same. I was just like, let's go. Let's keep going. It could be a danger, could be an element, so it could be something. But all I know is that I did not expect it. I did not think of who it, it's set, but at this point we don't know.
Yeah. But this note about Penrod having a fondness for Elend and being the hardest one to convince, obviously Breeze has opinions on why Penrod does what he does in this chapter, but I wonder if Penrod would have done it regardless as some sort of atonement, because he seems to feel bad.
Yeah, I was quite surprised because I had the what I remembered of Penrod and Phelan was that they're both anti-Elend. So for me, I was like, I expected both of them to be in on this removal of him. So I was taken aback by Penrod not having been so up to it. But it could be an act for me as well. Like he could have just made it seem that way, made it seem like he's against it so that it goes on record, basically, that he's noble. And that gets Ellen to trust him. So he was playing that side. But I just remember not liking Penrod completely and being like, okay, enemy, and hearing that he wasn't completely into taking over Elend. That was a nice surprise for me.
It boosts his likability. So my recollection of him from chapter 10 was that he was prepared to give up the city. He wanted to make sure that his rights to title were still there in whatever negotiations were to occur, and that he really doesn't like Kelsier. Or from Ellen's perspective, mentioning Kelsier was a mistake. So,
which is interesting because we obviously lean on Kelsier as a figure this episode.
Yeah. Penrod moved in, joining the other noblemen. The old fool probably thought he was going to end up as king. Well, Phelan had other plans for that throne. It wasn't Phelan's own posterior that would sit in it, of course. He had no interest in running a country. Seemed like a terrible way to make money. Selling things. That was a much better way. More stable. Less likely to lose one his head. Oh, but Phelan had plans. He'd always had those. He had to keep himself from glancing at the audience again. And at that point, you know that the plant is his intention for king.
Yeah. You're like, okay, for me, I wasn't like, it's exactly his intention for king. For me, I didn't think this individual is the one for king. I thought it was, this person is going to put something into action that puts somebody else on there. So it could be a heckler or somebody that he's put in there to nominate whoever. I didn't think it was the actual individual by this point. I can tell you that.
Gotcha. I did, or I figured. Obviously, I didn't know, but I figured, although I could have just as easily believed it to be someone who would disrupt the proceedings or something to that effect.
How did you not know if you had that in mind, if you had that this person, the plant is the person that's going to be his nomination for king, how did you not think of Set? You just didn't think
because, well, okay, we'll get into it now. I hate the reveal at the end.
Okay. Because, okay. So you did know.
Okay.
Did you know it was Set at this point then?
No, I had no idea it was set at this point. I just assumed that it was a figure that Phelan wanted as king.
Okay. Okay.
But it seems very foolhardy for Set to go into the enemy city. I mean, it's one thing for Elend to do it, and we obviously know his justifications, but I don't see any reason why Vin couldn't just kill Set right then and there and have that be over and done with. Or it seems so dangerous.
We do have Venture known for being too honorable, so.
But Venture's not king anymore, and Set would know this.
Yeah. I don't
And
know. Well, he's been massaged by Phelan as well.
perhaps,
But I guess that the main point here is you had seen that that's what his plan was, that the person that is in that crowd is his choice for king. I was a step behind in that thinking. And then we will get to the weaknesses of Set's decision when we get to the reveal, I suppose.
okay. Well, anyway, perhaps hate is a strong word, and it's a very cinematic moment, and it certainly throws a spanner in the works, but I cannot, just right now I'm struggling to comprehend the amount of circumstances that would lead to Set considering this a good idea.
Yeah,
Um,
so it actually is making it hard to believe that this is who it would be. Okay, I'm with you on this. I can understand.
Oh, but Phelan had plans. He'd always had those. He had to keep himself from glancing at the audience again. Instead, Phelan turned to study the rest of the assembly. They had all arrived except for Venture. 7 noblemen, 8 merchants, and 8 Ska workers. 24 men with Venture. The 3-way division was supposed to give the commoners the most power, since they ostensibly outnumbered the noblemen. Venture hadn't understood that merchants weren't Ska. Phelan wrinkled his nose. Even though the Ska assemblymen usually cleaned up before coming to the meetings, he could smell the stink of forges, mills, and shops on them. Men who made things. Phelan would have to be certain they were put back in their place once this is over. An assembly was an interesting idea, but it should be filled only with those who deserved the station. Men like Phelan. So, that idea of putting the Ska back in their place really heightens Phelan's evilness levels.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. It's like you have lived a Ska life. Okay? You've brought yourself up more than most people ever could dream. But you've lived a Ska life. You are Ska. These are your people, actually. But you yourself are being prejudiced in the way that the noblemen have been to you. But that irony is lost on you. You're like,
Yeah.
Lord, Phelan, he thought. Not long now.
Hopefully Elend would be late. Then maybe they could avoid his speech. Phelan could imagine how it would go anyway.
Now see, this wasn't fair. I should be king. Here, let me read you a book about why. Now, can you all please give some more money to the Ska?
Phelan smiled. The man next to him, Getru, nudged him.
You think he's gonna show up?
He whispered.
Probably not. He must know that we don't want him. We kicked him out, didn't we?
But he's the one that called the meeting, we learn later.
That doesn't make sense. But I don't know. Maybe he thinks Elend was throwing a fit, so he's made a meeting and then he's not going to attend. So there you go. That's his way of responding. I don't know.
Perhaps. Getru shrugged. He'd gained weight since the collapse. A lot of it.
I don't know, Lynn. I mean, we didn't mean he was just the armies. We have to have a strong king, right? Someone who will keep the city from falling.
Of course. And my name isn't Lynn.
Getru flushed.
Sorry.
We did the right thing. Venture is a weak man. A fool.
I wouldn't say that. He has good ideas.
Getru glanced down uncomfortably.
This is great. This is awesome. It is a nice way of us realizing that all that Phelan says in his head is not true. He's like, the assembly, we've taken him down. We don't want him and whatever. His perception is that. But here we have a gauge of somebody else who's like, they are uncomfortable with what, some people are uncomfortable with what they did. They know it was a bit of a backstabbing move, and they are a bit like, they feel bad because they don't hate Venture. They don't hate Elend. So as much as Phelan, yeah.
He's probably a lot more likable than I found him in the earlier parts of the book.
Yeah. His ideas at least have captured the people. So maybe just
Yeah.
his manner and all of that. So that was likable from the beginning. That was enough for them to feel uncomfortable. I think that means something, that they feel uncomfortable with what they did. They do think of him as a good man. Yes, they found him a little bit weak. But this lack of comfort, this lack of confidence from another person just reflects so poorly on feelings about everything. And we have that.
And with Phelan working as a countermeasure or as a person to tarnish Ellen's capability, I don't necessarily think there was anyone going around promoting Ellen's capability.
Yes. Yeah, there was no one vouching for him, I don't think.
So it's easier for the toxin to set in. Which brings you back to what now?
That brings me back to Penrod. With Penrod, he wasn't singing Ellen's praises. I don't feel like you were saying as well. It's kind of like the toxin could take hold because Penrod might be a little bit uncomfortable or something like that, but I don't feel like he was going, this is preposterous, we can't do this. I think it might have been a bit more performative. Just going back to how I feel that Penrod is not as good as Ellen thinks. I don't know. I just don't trust anyone.
I'm much more optimistic for Penrod's character.
Yeah.
I do think it was a really tough decision. Obviously, he came to the decision that he did, but I'm prepared to bet it legitimately carried some weight for him regarding...
You're probably right. I lack trust.
Phelan snorted, glancing at the clock.
Oh, last thing, sorry, before you go to there. And that is nicely wrapped up by Phelan. We've literally had that beautiful setup of, I love that everybody uses my name without pause. And literally the first person he speaks to, or second person he speaks to, calls him Lynn. Because the nobleman will call him what he's told them to call him because that's his new name. But the people he knows from before, they know who he is. He's Lynn. So and then put that next to Ellen, who has to tell his friends, can you not call me Elle? He has to do the same sort of thing. He has to say, this is my name. My name is Ellen, and then he's got to move to, you got to call me Your Majesty or whatever. He was on that whole journey, and Phelan over here is doing the same thing. It's like, this is my name, use this name, but he had to say it to this person. And it's probably not the last, the first and last time it's going to happen.
Very much 100% with that. Phelan snorted, glancing at the clock. It was time, though he couldn't hear the chimes over the crowd. The assembly meetings had become busy since Venture's fall. Benches fanned out before the stage and were crowded with people, mostly Ska. Phelan wasn't sure why they were allowed to attend. They couldn't vote or anything. More Venture foolishness, he thought, shaking his head. That's, again, important characterization. It speaks a little bit to my assessment of Phelan's lack of intelligence. I think it's, again, I don't think it's that he's dumb. It's just he doesn't have foresight. He's too self-absorbed to consider things that I guess he doesn't immediately like. No, that's not quite right.
I feel what you mean with this. He lacks. He's too self-absorbed. He doesn't realize. He doesn't think beyond the fact that he doesn't like the scar being there. He's like, well, why do you think that this? He doesn't think beyond why the scar there. Why Venture wants the scar there, and he can dislike why Venture wants the scar there. All of that, he can go all the way there with that thinking, but he's too busy just feeling his feelings. And so I'm with you on that. He lacks self-awareness.
Yeah. And again, I'm really enjoying this chapter so far, and his characterization, it's so efficient.
Yes, it's so neat. Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah. At the very back of the room, behind the crowd opposite the stage, two large broad doors let in the red sunlight. Phelan nodded towards some men, and they pushed the doors shut. The crowds hushed. Phelan stood to address the assembly.
Well, since
The assembly hall doors burst back open. Fashionably late. No, it's on time. Or is it? It's really
just
straddling that line.
Precisely when he means to.
A man in white stood with a small crowd of people, backlit by red sunlight. Very cinematic.
Mm-hmm. So epic. I enjoyed it. I
Yep.
was very satisfied with Phelan standing up and starting to speak and then being interrupted by this. This was great.
Yep. I want to see this movie, guys.
Mm-hmm.
Elend Venture. Phelan cocked his head, frowning. The former king strode forward, white cape fluttering behind him. His Mistborn was at his side, as usual, but she was wearing a dress. From the few times Phelan had spoken with her, he would have expected her to look awkward in a noblewoman's gown, yet she seemed to wear it well, walking gracefully. In fact, she looked rather fetching.
Of course she did.
Is there no one that thinks Vin is unattractive?
I guess look. She's nice. She's good looking. What do you want? maybe there'll be people that they're like, yeah, they know she's attractive, but she's not their type. So
Yeah. I'm not complaining. I'm just making a joke.
yeah, but there will be people that are like, yeah, Shan was a great one.
Yeah. Yet she seemed to wear it well, walking gracefully. In fact, she looked rather fetching. At least until Phelan met her eyes. She did not have a warm look for the assembly members, and Phelan glanced away. So that was epic.
I loved that. Vin's basically got resting bitch face.
See, again, I'm seeing the movie in my mind, and she's just walking by them, and I think she's got this dead stare at each and every member, and it's cold as ice.
Yeah. It would be so great to see that, like, to visually just, yes, make her striking, beautiful, but then you get this coldness and this fear. Like, that is a dangerous person. Whatever I would want to have that note of appreciating the beauty, but then also you take a closer look at her and you're like, oh, sorry, that's Daisy on the mic. Daisy, you can't do this now. Baby girl. Yeah, so I want to see the movie. This is one of the best. Look, when the movie does happen, we're going to critique this scene. The scene has to be properly done to our satisfaction.
Yes. Venture had brought all of his Allomancers with him, the former thugs of the survivors' crew. Elend apparently wanted to remind everyone who his friends were. Powerful men. Frightening men. Men who killed gods. Excellent!
Mm-hmm. That note or that message has come through to Phelan. As much as he was not self-aware before, this he was very aware of.
Yep. And Elend had not one, but two terracemen with him. One was only a woman. Phelan had never seen a terrace woman before, but it was still impressive. Everyone had heard how the stewards had left their masters after the collapse. They refused to work as servants anymore. Where had Venture found not one, but two of the colorful-robed stewards to serve him?
Go ahead. Yeah, comment.
This mindset, he still thinks of them as servants. He doesn't see people as equals, and I don't necessarily know that Elend is trying to create a society of equals because he himself is the king, but he's trying to approximate something like that. Not to mention just how dripping with envy this moment is.
Yeah.
And this is such a Phelan line and POV.
It's so, that this is more, you get such a rich view of his character through this POV. Because so it just never occurred to you that these terrorist people are following him of their own accord. They're not serving him. They're part of his crew, basically. You're not, it never occurred to you, Phelan, because that's just not how he thinks. So neatly done, because we've only got, it's actually a short POV, but it's all in there and all rich. It's so neatly done. Love it.
Yeah. The crowd sat quietly, watching Venture. Some seemed uncomfortable. How were they to treat this man? Others seemed odd. Was that right? Who would be awed by Ellen Venture, even if the Ellen Venture in question was clean-shaven, had styled hair, wore new clothes, and... Phelan frowned. Was that a dueling cane the king was wearing? And a wolfhound at his side? So, again, this wonky timeline that we're gonna get, he's had the uniform for somewhat of a while now, like not obviously super long, but enough for him to have made substantial strides in his personality.
He's been avoiding assembly meetings though.
But does that include even private meetings? Was he not talking to anyone at this time?
I suppose that's the vibe with the assembly, is that there's no single petitioners. You only speak in assembly meetings. It seems like that
can't be though, because how would Phelan have gone around getting everyone to come to
maybe people
a consensus?
Well, there you go. People weren't speaking to Elend by himself. That's the thing. Elend himself had spirited himself away, kept himself away, studying and carrying on and doing his own thing, avoiding the assembly and avoiding assemblymen. Avoiding the assembly would be the same, would involve avoiding assemblymen. So I can understand.
I guess.
Yeah. It's just we didn't get a good enough view of that. We didn't have him ignoring single audiences and things like that. I think that would have been better.
But he certainly went out and about in the city. He would go to the city walls and so on, right? So surely word got out that he at least was wearing the... Anyway, it really doesn't matter. This is small potatoes.
Well, one of my favorite things about this, though, is that who would be awed by Ellen Venture, even if Ellen Venture in question was clean-shaven, had styled hair, wore new clothing? That's exactly what you're doing. You are clean-shaven. You are obviously better dressed than you were before, but you are still seen as a merchant and not a nobleman. So it's quite the irony of him looking at Venture and being like, you can't just dress yourself up and be something else. It's like literally.
That is so great. How did I miss that?
I loved it. So good. Well, I'm glad that you're experiencing it now, because it's one of my favorite parts of this chapter.
Yeah, that right there is mind blown. I love that irony so much.
Especially, and it's done so well where he has to remind himself he's not king anymore. It's just so Branderson, so good.
Yeah. Oh, that makes me like this chapter so much more. Also, 2 terracemen Sazed went with.
Yes. He's being visible. He's not just studying. They obviously know the value of showing that sort of support, I think. So I don't know what's...
This is an important meeting.
Yeah, I don't know what Sazed's there to do, but it's important for him to be seen. That's what he's got to be. Yeah. And we've got Orisur with us.
Yes.
He's not king anymore,
Phelan reminded himself again. Venture strode up onto the assembly stage. He turned, waving for his people, all 8 of them, to sit with the guards. Venture then turned and glanced at Phelan. Phelan, did you want to say something? Phelan realized he was still standing.
I was just...
Are you Assembly Chancellor? Elend asked. Phelan paused.
Chancellor?
The king presides at assembly meetings. We now have no king, and so by law, the assembly should have elected a chancellor to call speakers, adjudicate time allotments, and break tie votes. He paused, eyeing Phelan. Someone needs to lead, otherwise there is chaos. Already, he's coming in strong.
I love it. You're like, yes, Ellen, go. And him just accepting and not throwing his toys about himself not being king is so striking to me. I enjoy that. I enjoy that people are expecting him to have such a huge reaction or whatever, but his calmness it puts people off, because they're like, this is really not what I was expecting. He's like, we don't have a king anymore. It's matter of fact. We don't have a king anymore, so this is how it's supposed to be. I'm sure you've considered all of this, right? Oh, perfect. Go, Elend.
Yeah. Despite himself, Phelan grew nervous. Did Venture know that Phelan had organized the vote against him? No, he didn't. He couldn't. He was looking at each of the assembly members in turn, meeting their eyes. There was none of the jovial, dismissible boy that had attended these meetings before. Standing in the militaristic suit, firm instead of hesitant, he almost seemed like a different person.
You found a coach, it appears. A little too late. Just wait.
Phelan sat down.
Actually, we didn't get a chance to choose a chancellor. We were just getting to that.
Elend nodded, a dozen different instructions rattling in his head. Keep eye contact. Use subtle but firm expressions. Never appear hurried, but don't seem hesitant. Sit down without wiggling. Don't shuffle. Use a straight posture. Don't form your hands into fists when you're nervous. He shot a quick glance at Tindwyl. She gave him a nod. Get back to it, Al, he told himself. Let them sense the differences in you.
They have. He did. We just went from a POV and where they did. Oh, love it.
Yes. Oh, he does so well this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
He walked over to take his seat, nodding to the other 7 noblemen on the assembly. Very well, he said, taking the lead. Then might I nominate a chancellor?
Yourself?
Asked Driddle, one of the noblemen. His sneer seemed permanent as far as Elend could tell. It was a passably appropriate expression for one with such a sharp face and dark hair. No, I'm hardly an unbiased party in today's proceedings. Therefore, I nominate Lord Penrod. He's as honorable a man as we're likely to find, and I believe he can be trusted to mediate our discussions. The group was quiet for a moment. That seems logical, Heddle, a forge worker, finally said. All in favor? Elend said, raising his hand. He got a good 16 hands. All of the ska, most of the nobility, only one of the merchants. It was a majority.
Hold up, Dorkus. In mine, it says he got a good 18 hands. All of the ska, most of the nobility, only one of the merchants. It was a majority, however.
Which one of us got it wrong?
No, it's not wrong. It's different. Yours said 16. Mine said 18.
Yeah, so... Okay, Elend is 1. All of the ska is 8, so that's 9. Okay, most of. That's where the wiggle room is.
Yeah.
Okay. 16 to 18. Wow.
Yeah. That for me, that's significant. I'm like, why did you have to do 18 instead?
Interesting. And only one of the merchants, so I suspect the bulk of the merchants are in Phelan's pocket.
Yeah.
Elend turned to Lord Penrod. I believe that means that you are in charge, Fersen. The stately man nodded appreciatively, then rose to formally open the meeting, something Elend had once done. Penrod's mannerisms were polished, his posture strong as he stood in his well-cut suit. Elend couldn't help but feel a little jealous watching Penrod act so naturally in the things that Elend was struggling to learn. Maybe he would make a better king than I. Perhaps. No. I have to be confident. Penrod is a decent man and an impeccable noble, but those things do not make a leader. He hasn't read what I've read and doesn't understand legislative theory as I do. He's a good man, but he's still a product of his society. He doesn't consider ska animals, but he'll never be able to think of them as equals. So that's him really taking in Tindwyl's lessons that he is the right person for the job.
Yeah, he's got to hold fast to that idea. I like that that it's realistic that he would have doubts and then have to steel himself against those doubts. That shows the character and gives him depth, not just, okay, I've been told this lesson, now I'm done with learning it. It's like you have to keep that in mind all the time. You have to not follow those doubtful thoughts.
Precisely.
With Phelan, just having this, I put a star here just because we've got Penrod. He doesn't consider the ska animals, which is nice, but he'll never be able to think of them as equals. Well, Phelan does not think of them as equals at all.
Correct. But I don't think anyone's thinking of Phelan for king, at least.
Well, yeah, even Phelan isn't.
Penrod finished the introductions, then turned to Elend.
Lord Venture, you called this meeting. I believe that the law grants you first opportunity to address the assembly.
Elend nodded, thankfully, rising.
Will 20 minutes be enough time?
Penrod asked. It should be, Elend said, passing Penrod as they traded places. Elend stood up at the lectern. To his right, the floor of the hall was packed with shuffling, coughing, whispering people. There was a tension to the room. This was the first time Elend had confronted the group that had betrayed him. As many of you know, Elend said to the 23 assembly members, I recently returned from a meeting with Straff Venture, the warlord who is, unfortunately, my father. I would like to give a report of this encounter. Realize that because this is an open meeting, I will adjust my report to avoid mentioning sensitive matters pertaining to the kingdom's security. So already, he's coming in so much more confident and with much more pragmatic things to talk about. I remember being very upset with his first speech as proposing nothing. Here he is coming in with important things that are necessary to discuss.
Way more direct, not busy, no fluff compared to what he was speaking, how he was speaking earlier.
And I think it is a very smart move to discuss the meeting with Straff and not ultimately do what he does and not talk about having been ousted, which obviously is what everyone would expect.
Mm-hmm. It just makes him look so good. Makes him look like, which is true, he really does just care about Luthadel, but he's put his pride aside. He's not like, oh no, you guys have insulted me and betrayed me and whatever, and it's about me getting my vengeance and my day in court against you. He's just like, no, there are other things to do, and it makes him seem so much more solid. Oh, so good.
Yeah. He paused slightly and saw the looks of confusion he had expected. Finally, Phelan, the merchant, cleared his throat. Yes, Phelan? Elend asked.
This is all well and good, Elend, but aren't you going to address the matter that brought us here?
The reason we meet together, Phelan, is so that we can discuss how to keep Luthadel safe and prosperous. I think the people are most worried about the armies, and we should primarily seek to address their concerns. Matters of leadership in the assembly can wait. Very authoritative, very correct, and yes.
This is such good politicking because it's an open meeting. So he's showing to the Scar people, look, showing to the people of Luthadel, all of them, I know that it's about your concerns. It's not about me. It's not about my ego.
Yeah.
Oh, so good.
I see,
Phelan said, obviously confused. The time is yours, Lord Venture. Proceed as you wish. Thank you, Chancellor. I must make it very clear that my father is not going to attack this city. I can understand why people would be concerned, particularly because of last week's preliminary assault on our walls. That was simply a test. Straff is too fearful of attacking to commit all his resources. During our meeting, Straff told me that he had made an alliance with Set. I believe this to have been a bluff, if unfortunately one with teeth. I suspect that he was indeed planning to risk attacking us despite Set's presence. That attack has been halted. So, obviously with hindsight, we know that Set is here, and we know that Set now has heard this.
Yes, so our question is, what's the response? What was there between them? Was there anything?
Yes, I would like to know. I would love just like 2 sentences from Set's POV to consider that tidbit of information. Obviously, we don't have it right here, and that's fine, but I'm curious.
Why?
Asked one of the worker representatives.
Because you're his son?
No, in fact. Straff is not one to let familial relationships hamper his determination. Elend paused, glancing at Vin. He was beginning to realize that she didn't like being the one who held the knife at Straff's throat, but she had given him permission to speak of her in his speech. Very, very good, Elend, that you're starting to realize that.
Well done.
But also very good, Vin, for giving him permission to do that. I hope it's not going to cause you too much angst, because, well, it's the truth. What do you think, Kitte, of this decision to tell everyone this?
It increases the danger on Vin. She's more of a target now. Like, everyone knew she was the Mistborn, but now we've created a huge expectation of her as well. So for the character, she's upset with expectations. People expect more from me when I dress, when I do this and that. Now you're being called again to save the city and all of that. It's massive.
Well, let me ask you, do you think there's a way that Elend could have not lied, but could have given sufficient information without saying that he used Vin to do it?
I don't think so.
Could he have simply said the details aren't necessary, or could he have said state secrets, which he indicated he essentially would be doing for some of this speech? And then obviously we know that Tindwyl later says it's important to associate himself with Vin and with Kelsier. So could he have found another way to do that?
I don't think so. I think that the way that it's done is the most powerful it will be, because you have to see her. It has to be her, because remember her, she was the one that she is the survivor's heir. She is a figure that needs to be there, quite literally.
Right. Because obviously he can't say, well, I bluffed, essentially, because that would get out, obviously, for one thing.
Yeah.
But could he have simply said, I threatened him? Again, just saying that, I don't think would be as powerful as specifically mentioning Vin, because their army can't.
Yeah. It would be like you're just lying, you're just talking crap. You went in there and you just said mean things and it worked. That doesn't sit well. Having the real reason is important here, I think. I don't think it would have been as successful without Vin.
I'm inclined to agree. He was beginning to realize that she didn't like being the one who held the knife at Straff's throat, but she had given him permission to speak of her in his speech. Still, she said it was all right. I'm not choosing duty over her.
Come now, Elend. Stop with the theatrics. What did you promise Straff to keep his armies out of the city?
I threatened him. My fellow assemblyman, when facing down my father in parley, I realized that we, as a group, have generally ignored one of our greatest resources. Okay, so it's important to note, he says, when facing down my father in parley.
Mm-hmm.
I thought this meeting didn't count as the parley, Elend.
Oh.
So
I guess it doesn't matter because he's not king anymore anyway.
It doesn't matter because he's not king anymore, but I'm basically saying he went and got the assembly mad at him over Elend trying to pretend that this meeting wasn't a parley when he really didn't need to. I don't see a reason why. I retract that. I can kind of understand why he would want the reassurance of knowing he would be able to have a second meeting with Straff, but really, I don't think it was worth. And obviously, he couldn't have known the outcome of the meeting with Straff before it happened, but I'm wondering, I don't know.
I am wondering, yes, okay, he did get the assembly upset at him because of, and yes, we were thinking about the parley, not parley issue, but I think they were upset anyway. Even if he had gone for that, there was still this feeling element in there that was going to bring him down anyway. So it was just one of the factors he contributed by ignoring the assembly.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's a moot point as I continue to think on it. Anyway, we think of ourselves as an honorable body created by the mandate of the people. But we are not here because of anything we ourselves did. There's only one reason we have the positions we do. And that reason is the survivor of Hathsin. Elend looked the members of the assembly in the eyes as he continued. I have at times felt, as I suspect many of you do, the survivor is a legend already, one we cannot hope to emulate. He has power over this people, a power stronger than our own, even though he is dead. We're jealous, even insecure. These are natural human feelings. Leaders feel them as acutely as other people, perhaps even more so. Gentlemen, We cannot afford to continue thinking like this. The survivor's legacy doesn't belong to one group or even to this city alone. He is our progenitor, the father of everyone who is free in this land. Whether or not you accept his religious authority, you must admit that without his bravery and sacrifice, we would not now enjoy our current freedom.
Yeah?
What does this have to do with Straff?
Phelan snapped. Okay. Very strong, Elend.
Mhm.
I'm loving it.
Yeah, and it's very well done. He can't go directly to Vin. He has to bring up the survivor of Hudson. He has to. My immediate at the first read, I was like, oh wait, Vin killed the Lord Ruler, but it's like no, the whole rebellion happened because remember that's how it is. We needed Kelsier to die, and he's the reason that people rose up at all. We know better because we're like, listen. If Vin was not there, shame for your rebellion. But he has to trot this reasoning out in this manner for it to work. It's really good.
Yeah.
And it's so honest because he actually involves, we're jealous, insecure, whatever that. That's actually what he's very well done that he says we. So that includes him, but he doesn't have to say, I'm jealous, I'm whatever. He's socialized the issue. Really good.
What does this have to do with Straff?
Phelan snapped. Everything. For though the survivor is gone, his legacy remains, specifically in the form of his apprentice. Elend nodded toward Vin. She is the most powerful Mistborn alive, something Straff now knows for himself. Gentlemen, I know my father's temperament. He will not attack this city while he fears retribution from a source he cannot stop. He now realizes that if he attacks, he will incur the wrath of the survivor's heir, a wrath not even the Lord Ruler himself could withstand. Also worth noting, Set hears this right now.
Yeah, that's lovely, yeah. But he's still going to do what he needs to do. Literally, Vin, as you said, Vin could just kill him right out.
Yeah, and for clarity, with regard to me saying I hated the reveal at the end, I love the drama of it.
Mm-hmm.
I do love the drama of it. I'm just very skeptical of the circumstances surrounding it. But of course, I'm sure we'll get more. Anyway, continuing. Elend fell silent, listening to the whispered conversations move through the crowd. News of what he'd said would reach the populace and bring them strength. Perhaps news would even reach Straff's army through the spies Elend knew must be in the audience. He'd noticed his father's allomancers sitting in the crowd, the one named Zane. And right there I'm thinking, oh, okay, so Zane is seeing the exploitation.
Yes, he's definitely enjoying it would be vindicating to him. At the same time...
Vindicating.
Vindicating. At the same time, I was like, I went, because now remember, I was one behind. I didn't have the idea that Phelan was going to be nominated. The person, his plant, was going to be the king nomination. I was wondering if this individual, because it's the same sort of mechanism that we had a guy looking into a crowd and seeing one person that he recognizes, which was Phelan, doing that to his plant, who's set. And then we had a recognized Zane in the crowd. I felt very led towards going, oh, is Phelan and Zane, are they doing something? Is there something there? So it was just something that crossed my mind because of the way it was written.
Interesting. Do we know if Set is an allomancer, by the way?
I don't think so.
Okay. But yeah, very packed assembly meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And when news reached Straff's army, the men there might think twice about obeying any orders to attack. I will say, on Zane being in the audience, one would hope, because I highly doubt that Straff has any sort of assembly, I would hope that Zane could see some of the more positive Elend qualities. But he viscerally dislikes Elend because of jealousy, so that probably won't sink into him.
Yeah, it would overpower whatever. He would be just like Phelan in that he doesn't spare a thought to giving Elend any bit of credit because he's too busy hating on him.
Yeah. And when news reached Straff's army, the men there might think twice about obeying any orders to attack. Who would want to face the very force that had destroyed the Lord Ruler? It was a weak hope. The men of Straff's army probably didn't believe all the stories out of Luthadel, but every little bit of weakened morale would help. It also wouldn't hurt for Elend to associate himself a little more strongly with the survivor. He was simply going to have to get over his insecurity. Kelsier had been a great man, but he was gone. Elend would have to do his best to see that the survivor's legacy lived on, for that was what would be best for his people. I'm 100% Team Elend now.
Yeah. His arc, his development has been so great. This is the height of it so far. He's like, I just have to get over my insecurity and do what needs doing because I care about the people. It's like, yes, you're such a good man.
Yep. You've been arced. Vin sat with a twisted stomach, listening to Ellen's speech. You okay with this? Ham whispered, leaning over to her as Ellen gave a more detailed account of his visit with Straff. Vin shrugged.
Whatever helps the kingdom.
You were never comfortable with the way that Kel set himself up with the Ska. None of us were.
It's what Ellen needs.
Yeah, and also, Ham, we're kind of past the point of no return on that one.
Yeah, and I don't feel like Ellen leaned...
Sorry, continue.
I don't feel like Ellen leaned too hard into the religious aspect of Kelsier. He used the word religion, or religious significance there, and that kind of covers it. He understands that there are people that see him as a religious figure, but he was focusing on just the facts of who this person is, what their effect was on this movement, this collection of people. What is his legacy? All of that. I don't feel like he's making it too much like Kelsier as a god.
Yeah, he said, even if you're not a believer, the stuff that he did has had this effect, and you cannot deny that.
Yeah, I like how reasonable that is. So yes, I suppose it would be, you would be more sensitive as Ham and the crew. You would be more sensitive to anything that puts Kelsier back on the pedestal. But I don't feel like Elend has.
I feel like Kelsier would be totally cool with Elend doing this, by the way, but I would almost argue that this is more exploitative than him mentioning Vin.
Yeah, well, it is what he did it for. He did this to have that lever to push on. He wants that exploit.
Yeah, and hence why I said I think he'd be okay with it, but Vin is there to give permission and Kelsier is not, which is why I would how I would hold that argument if I were to make it, which I am not necessarily.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. That's true. But it's kind of like, because of what he did with his own death, that kind of implies consent to me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I agree. And that's where I would fall on that argument.
Yeah.
So, for clarity, I don't think he's exploiting Kelsier here. I'm just saying it is closer to exploitation when put up against the question of whether or not Elend is exploiting Vin. Tindwyl, who sat in front of them, turned and gave her a flat look. Vin expected some recrimination for whispering during the assembly proceedings, but apparently the terrace woman had a different kind of castigation in mind.
The king,
she still referred to Elend that way,
needs this link with the survivor. Elend has very little of his own authority to rely upon, and Kelsier is currently the most well-loved, most celebrated man in the central dominance. By implying that the government was founded by the survivor, the king will make the people think twice about meddling with it.
I hope that, given that Tindwyl is having some influence on the contents of this speech, Vin will factor that into her estimation of whether or not she feels exploited by being mentioned, because there are other parties at play here who are also saying this is probably the best course of action toward the outcomes that we want collectively.
Yeah, and for me, I feel like that has to be the conclusion that Vin comes to, is that yes, it's unfortunate and it's uncomfortable, but it really is necessary. She wants what's good for the people as well. She wouldn't, if given the choice. I don't think that's why she says, "Yes, I'm giving you permission."
Yeah, and as she's about to think, it seems to me that this could be in her psyche more about being nervous about the notoriety than the exploitation aspect.
Yeah, she knows that that's not what's in Ellen's heart or head. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's more about this.
Ham nodded thoughtfully. Vin glanced downward.
What's the problem? Just earlier I was beginning to wonder if I were the hero of ages, and now I'm worried about the notoriety Elend is giving me?
She sat uncomfortably, burning bronze, feeling the pulsing from far away. It was growing even louder.
Stop it! Sazza doesn't think the hero would return, and he knows the history's better than anyone. It was foolish anyway. I need to focus on what's happening here.
Of course the hero can't return, because the person you thought the hero wasn't the hero. Therefore, when the hero shows up, the hero comes, not returns, because he wasn't here before.
Yeah, it's the first time. And they know that, right? They have had that thought. But I guess it's because of in the moment, she hasn't had the full thought. It frustrated me.
I just thought I was playing word games.
No,
being pedantic.
No, I think so. I think this is for real. Like it is. It's like, you're not focusing on the right aspect of this. So the words matter, Dorkus. Words matter.
Words do matter. After all, Zane was in the audience. Vin sought out his face near the back of the room, a light burn of tin, not enough to blind her, letting her study his features. He wasn't looking at her, but watching the assembly. Was he working at Straff's command, or was this visit his own? Straff and Set both undoubtedly had spies in the audience. Foreshadowing! And of course, Ham had guards mixed with the people as well. But Zane unnerved her. Why didn't he turn toward her? Zane met her eyes. He smiled slightly, then turned back to his study of Elend. Creepy! Cinematic, but creepy! Vin felt a shiver despite herself. So did this mean he wasn't avoiding her?
Focus! You need to pay attention to what Elend is saying. So what did you think of the shiver? Because you said creepy, so yes. So the shiver is kind of like, okay, whoa, that's weird. I was just looking at you and you looked at me. But her shiver and her inner monologue here is...
She doesn't see it as creepy. She's still crushing on him.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. She's kind of like, she's thinking like, why are you not looking at me? Why are you not paying attention to me? And he's paying attention to me. Like it... I don't think she knows that she's crushing on him. She still is not aware of what her feelings are. And I think there is still very much danger there. So it's very easy to just be like, yeah, well, I'm shivering because Zane could fight me. Because that is a real possibility. That's what I was worried about when we first knew he was here. Because he's part of the kill squad. Hello?
Yeah. And just the timing of it. It happening right when she starts thinking about him. I imagine he does it slowly and very intensely. There's an intensity to Zane.
And he smiles a little bit. It's just a slight smile. It's like, I know you're thinking about me. Oh, gosh.
He was almost done. He wrapped up his speech with a few comments on how he thought they could keep Straff off balance. Again, he couldn't be too detailed, not without giving away secrets. He glanced at the large clock in the corner. Done 3 minutes early. He moved to leave the lectern. Lord Penrod cleared his throat. Elend, aren't you forgetting something? Elend hesitated, then looked back at the assembly. What is it that you all want me to say? Don't you have a reaction? One of the ska workers said. About what happened at the last meeting? You received my missive. You know how I feel about the matter. However, this public forum is not a place for accusations or denunciations. The assembly is too noble a body for that kind of thing. I wish that a time of danger were not when the assembly had chosen to voice its concerns, but we cannot alter what has happened. He moved to sit again.
That's it?
Asked one of the ska.
You're not even going to argue for yourself to try to persuade us to reinstate you?
Kermit on the assembly? Elend paused again. No, I don't think that I will. You have made your opinions known to me, and I am disappointed. But you are the representatives chosen by the people. I believe in the power that you have been given. If you have questions or challenges, I will be happy to defend myself, but I am not going to stand and preach my virtues. You all know me. You know what I can do, and what I intend to do for this city and the surrounding populace. Let that stand as my argument.
Oh, so good, Elend. Yeah.
So good. I think, and we know that Tyndwyl disagrees here, but I think this is the best thing that he could have done and said.
Agreed.
Yeah. And by keeping in, but you are the representatives chosen by the people, I'm hoping that a lot of people start signing petitions, re-elect Elend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is all about him. He, as much as he says, I'm not going to stand here and preach about my virtues, that is a virtue in itself. All of his whole performance here has been to support himself. He's arguing in this by being so steadfast and being so calm and having a plan and whatever. That is what's getting him elected. It's very powerful.
Yeah. He returned to his seat. Vin could see hints of a frown on Tyndwyl's face. Elend hadn't given the speech that she and he had prepared, a speech giving the very arguments the assembly was obviously expecting.
Why the change?
Vin wondered. Because he knows instinctually what will work.
He's read the room. He's seen that they have had this expectation for him to throw his toys or to do something, and that he's not going to rise to that bait. Elend, and I can't say it enough. This chapter, Elend is peak.
100%. Tyndwyl obviously didn't think it was a good idea, yet oddly Vin found herself trusting Elend's instincts more than she did Tyndwyl's.
Well,
Lord Penrod said, approaching the lectern again.
Thank you for that report, Lord Venture. I'm not certain if we have other items of business.
Lord Penrod?
Yes?
Perhaps you should hold the nominations. Lord Penrod frowned. The nominations for King Penrod, Phelan snapped. Vin paused, eyeing the merchant.
He certainly seems up on things,
she noted. Yes, good Vin.
Mm-hmm.
Know that he is the enemy here.
Yeah, Vin picks those. We love how she is so insightful, just very quickly picks up on little instances. And this made me go, ooh, so if Elend hadn't asked for the nominations, Phelan would have. And that's also why he's snapping now, because Elend got to it first. And I think that's still a win for him.
Yes.
It's still
because
optically, looks good.
Because those who are in the know that if a month passes and no one does anything, he gets to stay king. So Elend reminding them to do it shows his benevolence. Is that the word? His acceptance of the assembly's decision.
Yeah. And his faith in the process. He's not going to manipulate it.
Yeah. Even if this is at its core a manipulation.
Yeah.
Yes, Elend said, eyeing Phelan as well. In order for the assembly to choose a new king, nominations must be held at least 3 days before the actual voting. I suggest we hold the nominations now so that we can hold the vote as soon as possible. The city suffers each day it is without a leader. Elend paused, then smiled. Unless, of course, you intend to let the month lapse without choosing a new king.
Good to confirm that he still wants the crown.
Thank you, Lord Venture. Then we'll do that now. And how exactly do we proceed?
Each member of the assembly may make one nomination if he wishes. So that we don't become overburdened with options, I would recommend that we all exercise restraint. Only choose someone that you honestly and sincerely think would make the finest king. If you have a nomination to make, you may stand up and announce it to the rest of the group. It's important to note the rest of what happens in this chapter, like as far as these nominations go, is precedent setting.
Mm-hmm.
So should something like this happen in the future, this is the time that those future people will look back to be like, well, this is how they did it then, so we should follow that lead.
Yeah. In the case of Elend versus blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Penrod nodded, returning to his seat. Almost as soon as he sat, one of the Ska stood.
I nominate Lord Penrod.
May I never?
I love that voice, actually. It's really well done.
You'll never hear it again after this chapter.
I feel like one of the Ska is gonna appear. So you're gonna be doing that Ska 1 voice a lot.
Oh boy.
No, wait, now I'm gonna start. No, I don't want to encourage you too much because then you might expect me to do it for like the next. No.
Oh my gosh. Stay tuned next week, folks, for Kitte Kermit.
in the intro. Elend had to expect that. After nominating Penrod to be Chancellor, why give such authority to the man that he knew would be his greatest contender for the throne?
The answer was simple. Because Elend knew that Lord Penrod was the best choice for Chancellor.
Sometimes he's a little too honorable.
Vin thought, not for the first time. Now, she has a thought later on where she wonders if he manipulates him. And again, that speaks to what we were talking about earlier about whether or not that Penrod would have nominated Elend regardless. Because they're a bit on the nihilistic side, saying, well, he only nominated Elend out of some sort of obligation for being nominated in the first place. And I'm not necessarily sure that's the case. I do believe in Elend's altruism on the matter.
And Penrod's altruism as well. But he actually has some sort of regard. So I'm with Vin. I'm just the nihilist. I'm like, no, he's just doing this because, yeah, just lack of trust Vin. Lack of trust Kitty. Sometimes he's a little too honorable.
Vin thought, not for the first time. She turned to study the Ska assemblyman who had nominated Penrod. Why were the Ska so quick to unify behind a nobleman? She suspected that it was still too soon. The Ska were accustomed to being led by noblemen, and even with their freedom, they were traditional beings, even more so than the nobility. A lord like Penrod, calm, commanding, seemed inherently better suited to the title of king than a Ska.
Interesting that we don't have we know that Phelan doesn't want to be the king, but we knew he was a prominent figure in the assembly anyway. Nobody wants him. Nobody's nominating him. But I also will concede that, yeah, he's probably also made it clear that there is a certain... He will decide whether he's nominated for king or not. I think he's in more control of other people. But it just is to be noted that the Ska have their own leaders that they can choose from, and then they don't, because, well, if they're anything like Phelan.
And I do remember Kelsier having a thought that was distinctly similar to this thought that she has here.
That he's too honorable?
No, that the Ska will have to get over something or other.
Yeah, they'll have to get over
eventually.
Yeah, eventually.
And here the thought comes.
They'll have to get over that eventually. At least they will if they're ever going to be the people that Elend wants them to be.
The room remained quiet, no other nominations being made. Few people coughed in the audience, even the whispers now dead. Finally, Lord Penrod himself stood.
I nominate Lord Elend Venture.
Ah, someone whispered behind her. Vin turned, glancing at Breeze.
What?
Brilliant. Don't you see? Penrod is an honorable man, or at least as honorable as noblemen get, which means that he insists on being seen as honorable. Elend nominated Penrod for Chancellor.
Hoping in turn that Penrod would feel obligated to nominate Elend for king.
Vin realized. She glanced at Elend, noting a slight smile on his lips. Had he really crafted the exchange? It seemed a move subtle enough for Breeze himself. And that's the line regarding how altruistic is he versus how not, or how manipulative.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see it. The smile is just satisfaction that, yes, he's done what I hoped he would for me. Yeah, okay. But I think the expectation, when I think of it in Elend's mind, it's like, I'm happy that he's as honorable as I thought he would be, and that is why I used this particular button. I pressed this button. Whereas other people are like, we know he desires power, therefore this is the button you needed to press.
Right. Rhys shook his head appreciatively.
Not only did Elend not have to nominate himself, which would have made him look desperate, but now everyone on the assembly thinks that the man they respect, the man they would probably choose as king, would rather have Elend hold the title. Brilliant!
Penrod sat and the room remained quiet. Vin suspected that he also had made the nomination so that he wouldn't go uncontested to the throne. The entire assembly probably thought that Elend deserved a chance to reclaim his place. Penrod was simply the one who was honorable enough to voice the feeling.
But what about the merchants? They've got to have their own plan. Oh, yes, Vin.
Good, Vin. Smart, Vin.
Yeah.
Yes, Vin. Elend thought that it was probably Phelan who had organized the vote against him. Good, Elend. Smart, Elend. They'd want to put one of their own on the throne, one who could open the city gates to whichever of the kings was manipulating them, or whichever paid the best. Yes and no, Elend. Good, Elend. Smart, Elend.
Just consider, yeah, it's definitely a factor. Don't worry.
Phelan skips part B, which is a merchant on the throne. He goes straight to part C.
Yes, that is the thing that they didn't foresee. Phelan being such a sneaky sneak.
She studied the group of 8 men in their suits that seemed even more fine than those of the noblemen. They all seemed to be waiting on the whims of a single man. What was Phelan planning? One of the merchants moved as if to stand, but Phelan shot him a harsh glance. The merchant did not rise. Phelan sat quietly, a nobleman's dueling cane across his lap. Finally, when most of the room had noticed the merchant's focus on him, he slowly rose to his feet.
I have a nomination of my own.
There was a snort from the ska section. Now who's being melodramatic, Phelan? One of the assemblymen there said. Just go ahead and do it.
Nominate yourself.
Phelan raised an eyebrow.
In fact, I'm not going to nominate myself.
Vin frowned, and she saw confusion in Elend's eyes.
Though I appreciate the sentiment, I am but a simple merchant. No, I think that the title of king should go to someone whose skills are a little more specialized. Tell me, Lord Venture, must our nominations be for people on the assembly?
Where we're at now, I'm like, we were looking at parallels between or connections between what Phelan's doing and what Elend's doing. Here, he has had the same sort of optic thing of not doing what was expected of him. And that has given him some sort of power. That's given him leverage. It's not as good looking as Elend's one. It's not as, as noble looking, but it still optically looks good that he's not doing something that was expected of him. And clearly we see the effects of not doing as expected. Elend's already feeling confused. They're all like, okay, what's up? And credit to Phelan, he knows. He's asking this question so that everybody can hear the answer.
Yes, and I had an interesting thought. When Elend says no, this does open the door for Vin to be nominated.
By Zane.
I think only assemblymen can nominate.
True, yeah.
But who knows if there's not a religious ska on the assembly.
Yeah, or, a group that then pressures someone on the assembly to do a nomination.
And obviously Vin could decline if she wanted, but if she thinks that she's the hero of ages, if Sazed thinks she's the hero of ages, which I don't think he was convinced quite yet on the matter, and if things are paralleling with Alendi, it's not impossible.
Nope. I don't think it's going to happen, but it's interesting to think about.
Yeah. No, the king doesn't have to be an assemblyman. I accepted this position after the fact.
So that's
the king's primary.
That's the thing that's Elend wasn't on the assembly. Oh, Elend is on the assembly and king. Do you see that? Because I accepted this position after the fact. So it's like he's saying he did accept the position after. So I don't know what he means by after the fact. It could mean I accepted being king after I became an assemblyman or whatever.
Or after I made the assembly?
Yeah, exactly. So it seems like you would have to make the assembly, or he was king, and that made him make the assembly. That's what I saw it. So that's probably why
Yeah,
I do see him as he is still part of the assembly, though.
right. I'm still a bit confused. Someone smarter than me in the audience, let us know, because I'm having a low brain moment.
You're probably going
Anyway.
to confirm it in chat to yourself.
Yeah, probably. I do tend to have such wonderful insight like 2 seconds after we stop recording. No, the king doesn't have to be an assemblyman. I accepted this position after the fact. The king's primary duty is that of creating, then enforcing the law. The assembly is only an advisory council with some measure of counterbalancing power. The king himself can be anyone. In fact, the title was intended to be hereditary. I didn't expect certain clauses to be invoked quite so quickly.
Ah, yes. Well then, I think the title should go to someone who has a little practice with it, someone who has shown skill with leadership. Therefore, I nominate Lord Ashweather Set to be our king.
Now, when I read that, I forgot about the guy in the audience, and I was like, that would be an interesting missive for Set to get in his camp.
Okay, so you didn't put them together. You were busy going, oh, okay, yeah. What?
Vin thought with shock as Phelan turned, gesturing toward the audience. A man sitting there removed his ska cloak, pulling down the hood, revealing a suit and a face with a bristling beard. Oh dear, Breeze said.
It's actually him?
Vin asked incredulously as the whispers began in the audience. Breeze nodded. Oh, that's him, Lord Set himself. I think we might be in trouble. End chapter.
That was so dramatic. The thing is, like, I can see it just to zoom in, and then it's whoa, like, because he takes off the scar coats or whatever. Oh, so good.
Another very YA moment.
Yes, but can we talk just to have the end bit of the reveal, your feelings about the reveal?
Why would he risk going into the city? I don't see why he needs to be there, I guess, for this, but more specifically, well, I mean, it just seems like a foolish risk. I guess I'm just struggling to comprehend why he would think that this is a pragmatic decision. Does he really need to do this? I just don't get it. I don't see it. I want to know the circumstances that led to him thinking that going into the city, presumably unarmed. I mean, I have to hope that some guards are around him in disguise as well, but it seems foolishly dangerous. And again, I keep thinking to myself, well, Elend did it, but Elend didn't have much of a choice. He was the weaker of the three-party system we've got going on. And we are intimately, meaning we had his POV on the matter, enlightened as to why he makes the decisions that he does. So there's still time to convince me and win me over of this, but I don't know how else to say it. I'm sure I'll have 20 ways to say it that you can read in the comments section. Right, future Dorkus?
Right.
Screw you, future Dorkus.
Well, my only comment on that is I can see him relying on Ellen's honor and restraint. I can see him going, oh, well, we know what Ellen's like. Also, either he underestimates Ellen and therefore thinks he's safe, number one.
Or it won't matter because Ellen's not king.
Yeah. It won't matter because Ellen's not king. He's got Phelan, the merchants and whatever. He's got that faction standing for him. And he knows that if he is now nominated and then killed, that is completely against everything that Elend is trying to fight for in this.
That raises a very interesting point and mitigating factor for me. It would be tremendously poor taste and reflect very poorly on the kingdom if someone who was just nominated to be king ends up being killed almost immediately. Yeah, okay.
So that's why he had to be in the disguise.
Yeah, that wins me over right there, I think.
Yeah.
On this. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm convinced.
There is risk, of course, in going there and being discovered, but yeah, the fact is as soon as he's nominated, he kind of gets this immunity or this protection that this would not be a good idea.
Okay.
Mm.
Wow. Total 180 then on my hate exclamation from earlier in this episode. Yeah, that changes this for me. Good move. Smart.
We don't really like it. We don't want him to be smart. We don't need
No,
this
obviously
problem.
not.
God, we have enough, okay? But so does
Yeah.
that make this chapter actually even better than you thought it was?
It does. It makes the chapter that much better for me. Yeah.
Yay.
It unironically, yes. You are hearing me change my mind in real time, and that hitting me.
Mm-hmm. We got the politics and we got the intrigue and the changing of minds and things like that. Just shows how rich the story is.
Yeah.
Like the video.
If you like, and subscribe to That Darn Kita if you get a chance, because she's got a great channel all her own where she does cool stuff.
And Dorkus is there on
Thank you.
Thursdays.
And I'm there on Thursdays. Thank you all for tuning in. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we'll see you next time. Okay, thanks, bye.